Hey, the stream is going live, and I'm just getting a little set up. I will be drawing shortly, opening some windows for myself. Let's see. Looks like my stream health is good. Great. So yeah, I'm about to work on this illustration of Deadman, a character that I don't actually know all that well, but on my Patreon page, at a certain support tier, which is on the high side, I say, like, one of the things I will give the people is an illustration of their choice, of their request. And so one of my patrons supports me at that level and said, could you please draw Deadman? I'm like, yeah, let's give it a shot. And so that's what I'm doing right now. I'm drawing this for a guy named Mark that's one of my Patreon supporters. I've been looking at a lot of pictures of bodies, corpses, which isn't super pleasant, but I really wanted to do something with Deadman to make it look like he was sort of almost just muscle, like almost no skin, because he's literally dead. And I wanted to sort of imply that, even though he wears a costume. And what I'm trying to sort of decide, one thing that I haven't decided yet, is, I'm not sure if I want to give him boots. He does wear boots usually, or if I was going to sort of illustrate him basically completely naked, as well as sort of show him in life. He was a trapeze artist, so it's a little bit of a montage. So I'll decide that later. I've basically sketched out what I need to keep going. I did a loose sketch. I lightboxed that sketch. Now what I'm planning on doing is really adding the definition, making it complete by inking it, and I hope to use some Prismacolors to color it as well. So I anticipate this stream taking a while, at least 2 hours. I'm going to try to focus on, working, keep it moving, keep it going. But I will try to also take a look at the chat room and answer any questions you have, because I know that it's not much fun to watch a video in silence. So, okay, great. A few folks already in the chat room. We've got No Hurt Feline, hello, Louis B, Ghost Dog, and Frankie Smile Show, who says, Deadman, never heard of that one. Have you reviewed it? I have not reviewed Deadman yet. He's a DC Comics superhero, and he's been around since the 70s at least. I mean, I don't think it was the 60s that he was invented, but again, I haven't really read a lot of that early stuff, but I have seen a bunch of the early stuff. I believe Carmine Infantino drew the first ever issue, and then Neil Adams took over. So that's mostly what he's sort of remembered for, is honestly like really great art. Probably a tricky character to really make a good story with. I mean, when you're dead, he's sort of a ghost, essentially. He can possess people, and through them, he almost lives their life to correct crimes and stuff. You could almost think of it sort of like a Quantum Leap. So I'm actually going to hold this upside down for a moment, and I need to open up a little window so that I can see that I've got it centered. Move a couple things. And I'm about to get started in earnest. I know this is a little bit of a slow start. Just wanted to level set for everything. Oh, there's a question. Ghost Dog asks, thoughts on the Spawn reboot? Curious, but, not something I'm necessarily excited for. I liked Spawn when I was younger, when I was a teenager, but I haven't really read it in quite a while. The fact that Todd McFarlane himself is going to direct it is, that's bold. That's interesting. It's not like he really has a lot of experience in that area, so I would think that would be a potential issue. But he's definitely been around to see a movie version and a cartoon version of his show adapted before, and he knows the material, so he might do fine. So I would just say, like, mild curiosity. I do think that Jamie Foxx is frequently a very good actor, so that's a cool cast move. But as I say, I'm just not a huge fan. Hello, let's see. Is it? And I'm gonna guess at this name, Jürgen Furkulat. That's my best guess at your name. Good morning. Good morning, your time. That's right. Yeah, it's early. Well, not early. Mid-evening here on the West Coast where I live. And yeah, I'm just gonna work on sort of finding some shadows. I'm going to try to really be bold with my shading on this because I think it would benefit the character. So that's why there's not necessarily a lot of detail on this sort of acrobat version of the character, who was known as Boston Brand. That was his real name. And then he died and became Deadman. Because he worshipped a fictional Hindu god that revived him as a type of ghost. Riley Desert Grizzly says his music videos are pretty famous, though, and well done, so I'm holding on to hope, especially if he surrounds himself with a good crew. I'll be honest, I did not realize that Todd McFarlane has directed music videos. That's news to me. I'm going to move something. I have... This is my tablet, my digital tablet, because I've actually been working a lot on an animation piece for a Comic Tropes episode in July. Been working on that since February. It's short, don't get your hopes up, it's only 15 seconds. But animation takes a lot of time. A lot of time. Trying to do my best on it. So I haven't really been able to go to the comic book store in a while. I quite literally have no money these days, but I've been hearing a lot of things about the new Hulk book. I want to say it's called The Immortal Hulk. Bruce Banner's back, apparently, and it's treated more as like a true sort of monster book, which I do think is an interesting direction to go, because the Hulk was definitely portrayed as very, very much a Frankenstein's monster in his first several issues that Stan Lee wrote. But it's definitely going to be a fine line for the creative team if you don't want to make Bruce Banner a supervillain, But I've been hearing that it's a pretty good title. I don't know if anybody out there maybe has read it and would recommend it or not. I'm curious about that one anyway. Let's see. Sounds pretty good. Hello, Brian A. Well, this is nice having a bunch of people in the chat room. Feel free to, ask me or each other anything you want. Frequently we talk about all sorts of pop culture when I do these live streams, if you haven't joined one before. Just try to get a conversation going to help pass the time. And every once in a while, if I feel like I have done something correct, I may discuss technique, but I'm an amateur artist, so it depends. Let's see. I saw the movie Upgrade recently. I thought it was fantastic. If you've ever enjoyed something like RoboCop, or now that I think of it, The Crow, it's pretty cool, pretty good world building, done in a not in-your-face manner. It's just sort of like, by about like halfway through the movie, you sort of realize that they've done quite a bit to establish a near-future world. Actually, you know what it reminds me of? That show Black Mirror. That's what it reminds me of, but combined with like hardcore action. I mean, it earns its R rating. It's pretty brutal stuff. But yeah, I thought that one was really cool. What's the next superhero movie we're gonna get? Let's see. It's there's got to be something in July, right? Oh, Ant-Man and the Wasp. So that'll be fun because we've gotten a bunch of sort of serious stuff. So by July, I'll definitely be in the mood for something kind of lighter. Hopefully that fits the bill. And trying to think of like what else might be coming up in nerd culture. Let's see. Okay, Riley Desert Grizzly says, Deadman and Batman always make me think of Neil Adams. He's worked on both and did some fantastic work. Neither his creation, but maybe the most famous versions. I think that Neil Adams definitely produced the most famous version of Deadman. He's the first guy I think of anyway when it comes to Deadman. Even though he didn't do that many issues. There haven't been tons of issues of Deadman, period. But there's a lot more competition for something like Batman. I really liked it when Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams were working on Batman. It's definitely a fantastic version of the character that focuses sort of more on like slightly more globe-trotting, almost James Bond-esque type of idea of the character. But also makes him a detective, like really focuses pretty hard on that, and I like that. So they played up some cool elements, a little less mundane crime, a little more James Bond sort of globe-trotting adventures, big adventures. Yeah. Yeah. That'll be a fun episode someday, like I have to do a comic tropes about Neil Adams, and I'll probably focus mostly on his work in the 70s, because it was fairly groundbreaking stuff at that point. Not just that he was a quality illustrator, but he really did do some pretty innovative things in terms of how he would lay out panels and stuff. It was definitely, prior to Neil Adams, there weren't too many artists that broke away from just standard grids. Boom, 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 lots of boxes. What else? I missed some things, sorry. Ghost Dog says, I've seen Upgrade twice at this point. Best movie I've seen this year. It's up there for me, too. Yeah. No Hurt Feline says that she's heard that it's good. Hey, Diego. Welcome. Let's see. Mohammed says, hey, everybody. Hey, Chris. On a side note, speaking of movies, is it possible Marvel will make more animated movies of projects that won't be part of the MCU? Spider-Verse looks good. I agree. I think Spider-Verse might be really, really good, and if it is, then yeah, I think that Sony and Marvel and other people may really look to animation to sort of do things that they almost can't do in live action. In other words, go more sci-fi and maybe go more loyal to adapting the comics. I really think that Spider-Verse may be a story with a multiverse, parallel dimensions of Spider-Man characters. That's just based on the trailer showing Gwen Stacy. That's the big difference for me. But I've those directors, Lord and Miller, I've liked everything those guys have ever done. From Clone High to the 21 Jump Street movies, Last Man on Earth. What else have they done that's really good? Oh, the Lego movie, the first Lego movie. I mean, they're funny, creative guys. So I'm very curious to see what they've done with Into the Spider-Verse, right? Yeah. And I should probably try to speed up a little on this littler guy so that I can get to the sort of main illustration. But you know, this is for somebody that supported my channel financially, and I want to do the best job that I can. So, taking my time here and there. Riley Desert Grizzly says, the Denny/Adams Batman is always what I think of when I think of Batman. Big gold belt, long ears. I have all my dad's comics from that era. An Adams episode would be wonderful. I'll definitely at some point do a loud car outside. Do a Neil Adams episode. I also would really love to do a Jim Aparo episode because he really was illustrating Batman when I got into comic books originally, and so his version just sort of is almost the most definitive for me personally. You know, it's definitely what I was introduced to, and I really came to love that artist's work, Jim Aparo. So we'll see. You know what? I'm going to switch to a smaller inking pen for just a moment. Are you in Florida? I've heard of skunk apes down there. I am not. I'm near Seattle. But I did spend time living in New Orleans, and they talk about skunk apes down there. That's sort of their version of Bigfoot, which ironically, now that I think of it, like Bigfoot is quite a huge mythological creature here in the Pacific Northwest. But down there they call it skunk ape a lot, and that name made me laugh out loud the first time I ever heard it, skunk ape. So I just sort of held on to that name for whatever reason. What did I think of Han Solo? You know, when I first came out of Han Solo, I actually liked it quite a bit. I'd had a good time. It was fun. And in my ranking, I put it above, well, of course, above the prequels. No offense, I don't really care for those too much. And I was even sort of putting it above Return of the Jedi and Rogue One. And then it's been a couple weeks, and I've reassessed my thoughts on it, and I was like, yeah, some of it was fun. Like, I thought that some of the characters were likable and stuff like that, but it was pretty insubstantial. It was a pretty inconsequential movie. So now it's sort of just above the prequels, just because I could rewatch that, you know, like that's sort of, what would we call that? That would be that's a hangover movie. That's where, you know, you just sort of wake up with a headache and whatever's on TV, you'll watch it and you'll have an okay time in that situation. Oh, darn it. Hold on. I just opened a beer and it exploded. And I don't have napkins. Wait, I see something. There's some tissue paper. Give me a moment and I'll get right back to drawing. There you go, there's some drama. Alcoholic Chris has made a mess. So yeah, anyway, my opinion on Solo has diminished within like the week or 2 weeks since I've seen it. It's you know, it's kind of fun, but it was kind of meaningless too. Hey, Randy Stone, good friend of mine that I've known for many, many years, and Randy is in the chat room. Randy runs. He's sort of got his own comics imprint called Altruist Comics that you can find on Facebook, and he'll post things that he doesn't necessarily put in print, but you can also find out other comics work that he's done. Randy, don't you have like work in an upcoming anthology that's available on like Amazon for pre-order? I'm pretty sure that I'm remembering that right. If so, you know, feel free to plug it for anybody reading it. I'm just cleaning up my mess. I had a nice cup of water here, but there was nowhere else to let the beer explode into, so I had to douse my cup of water. Oh yeah, that's good cheap beer. Yeah, Randy's made a couple really cool comics over the years that he's like, you know, self-published and stuff. I always admire that. Like, it takes a lot of hard work to self-publish. He's got a great superhero book called Champion. Let's see. I think Deadman will make it to film. If they ever do that Justice League Dark idea, then yeah, Deadman will definitely be included in that. I can't imagine DC having their act together enough to do a Deadman solo movie anytime soon. I mean, yeah, DC can barely do Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, so I don't think Deadman's coming to film by himself anytime soon. We'll see. Who else is here? I would prefer an Animal Man movie. You know what? Like, Animal Man, as conceived by Grant Morrison, I think would be really cool. Actually, didn't Jeff Lemire also have a pretty good run on that? I think I'm remembering that right. Anyway. Yeah. Animal Man could definitely support a movie. He's a pretty interesting character. You know what? I'm going to just work on this arm because it overlaps the main character, and then I'm going to really focus on the sort of main Deadman illustration. Oh, I don't even have that centered very well. Do you have a Twitter or Instagram? That's from CB4 Public Enemy. Yes, for Twitter. But only recently. I'm so busy that I don't do a great job promoting the channel. I don't. I know what to do in terms of social media, but I don't have a lot of time. So, but I've recently launched a Comic Tropes Twitter page. Twitter profile, I should say, and there's also a Facebook page. The Twitter one is, you can look up Comic Tropes, but it's technically at C Tropes. They shortened it. So yeah, I try to always, plug if a new episode has come out or anything like that. Let's see, what else? Pretty excited for Swamp Thing. Oh, I missed a few things. And Randy Stone answered my question. Yes, he has work in an anthology called If, capital IF, and you can find that for pre-order on Amazon right now. I don't know too much about it, but since it's got a story by Randy, I'll definitely be picking it up. He always does really interesting stories. He thinks outside the box. Nothing cliche. Wouldn't be easy to find tropes to discuss unless I'm talking about how he's subverted them. Let's see. I love finding old sci-fi series that were way before my time. I really enjoyed the Buck Rogers in the 25th Century and Prisoner DVD sets. I also found a series called UFO. That's from No Hurt Feline. Yeah. The Prisoner. Oh man, I'm a fan of. That was a really cool show. I don't love the final episode. I respect that Patrick McGowan was going for something weird and trippy and surreal, and he accomplished that. It's not super satisfying to me personally. Some people get something out of it. It's very open to interpretation, but I did like the idea of the series, and each episode really had some interesting ideas that they explored. So, big fan, yeah. What else? I know I'm missing a few things. Sorry about that. Animal Man should have a Netflix show, says Ghost Dog. That'd be cool. Mohammed Abdallah says British sci-fi is amazing. It's pretty dark, but the acting and storytelling is often great. I agree. I love things like, of course, Doctor Who. What was that old show in like either the late 70s or 80s about kids with mutant powers? It was a little bit like New Mutants. It's not coming to me. It was a short-lived, cool sci-fi show. Blake 7 was an interesting British sci-fi series. A lot of them are like pretty low budget, so like the effects aren't always like necessarily convincing. But what's cool about it is the writers just go for it. They don't let the fact that they've got a small budget hinder them. They still go for like really big ideas and just sort of trust the audience to suspend disbelief so that you get something out of it. He also mentions Buckaroo Banzai. Yeah, Buckaroo Banzai is fantastic. Come on, that's a cult classic if ever there was one. Everybody should give that one a watch at some point. All right, almost done with the part that I need to do on this. I need to do it. And it should probably take care of things for now. All right, I drifted off with what I was talking about. I was just sort of muttering, sorry. I'll be right back to you guys in just a second, just sort of focusing on this. All right, and I'll just sort of blacken all that. I'm going to flip this around and get started on the drawing proper, so I need a drink. Who said what? Let's see. Vedata Plays says, Animal Man should be played by Aaron Eckhart. Yeah, actually, that's actually pretty good casting. He's got the right look and the right age because he's got family and stuff. But that's a character that if they wanted to cast it as like a different ethnicity or something, that wouldn't bother me at all because he's just sort of such an everyman. Yeah. But yeah, Aaron Eckhart's a good actor. That would work. Few people talking about how good Buckaroo Banzai is. Completely agree, folks. Completely agree. I'm looking to see if I've got a bigger brush pen than what's in my hand. Nope. I'll try this. Chris, do you have a favorite sci-fi horror film? Yeah, I love horror. I mean, if we're just sort of, does it have to be a sci-fi and horror film, or are you saying sci-fi or horror? If it's purely horror, I would have to say that either Jaws or The Shining work best for me in terms of being just both like an excellent movie and they disturb me. Let's see. I also really like Evil Dead, the whole series. But if it has to have a sci-fi element to it, I'm thinking. Because there's only like one that's sort of coming to me. I'm thinking of Event Horizon. It isn't a well-structured movie, really, but it does have several effective scares within it. So, yeah. Are you drawing that from memory? It looks really good. No, I mentioned earlier, I had a couple steps that I did not live stream. I did several studies of musculature, and I was really looking at a bunch of corpses specifically to focus on just muscle tissue. And then when I got one that I liked. I light boxed it onto this with just sort of like some rough details, and now I'm just inking it, and I plan on coloring it for the live stream. So no, this isn't completely drawn from memory. I'm not that good. But now that I have drawn this, I could probably draw something very similar to this from memory. Like once I've done a pose or something like that, I'm usually pretty good at being able to replicate it in the future. But this has some reference to get here. Reference is a tricky thing, you know. I think that what keeps me being held back from being a good artist is that I'm overly reliant on reference. I just am. And I think that like using a bunch of reference you can still have some artists that do good work. Shoot, I had somebody's name in mind and all of a sudden I've blanked on it. The guy that did Ex Machina, Tony Harris. I like Tony Harris's style. I think that's a bit referenced. I think some of Brian Hitch's stuff is a bit referenced. But I think that those artists are totally capable of going away from reference if they need to just create something completely out there for like a panel and they just don't have, you know, the right reference. They can still draw it. But then there's artists like, you know, Greg Land who feel very tied to that reference, like very incapable of illustrating, you know, anything without it. So that's sort of my biggest fear as an artist is not being able to be free enough, because I think you lose energy and expression a lot of times if you're relying too much on reference. Yeah, and it's become a bigger issue in comics today than it used to be. Now, there's always been some artists who have been guilty of using reference. They used to call it a swipe file. Artists used to basically find a pose by like another artist or a photograph that they really liked, maybe something in a magazine, and they'd tear it out and they'd keep a swipe file of really cool poses that they could pull on when they needed to maybe do like, you know, an opening splash page or something like that to make it look really good. But that's pretty different than these days. Like, you know, you could just use Google image search and probably find reference that's close to what you're going for every time, but it might not be exactly what you need. You know, you just sort of are like, oh, well, this is close enough for what I had in my head, and I'm going to settle for this pose. But it doesn't, and yeah, as an illustration, in and of itself, it might look good. But from a storytelling point of view, panel to panel might not always be awesome. So, okay, I went a little long on that one. You know what? Someone asked me, what's my favorite sci-fi horror movie? And it didn't come to me. But CB4 Public Enemy Steel just said John Carpenter's The Thing. Yes, absolutely. I love that movie. Don't know why it didn't come into my head. I own it. I watched it fairly recently. Excellent, excellent sci-fi horror movie. So there's the answer. Alex Ross never uses references. That's from Caltech. You know, there's somebody that I think, yes, he uses reference, but a lot of painters do. So I don't think that, like, in and of itself is using reference bad. No, not always. Can it limit you as a comic book artist? Absolutely. It can definitely become a crutch that can hurt panel-to-panel storytelling. Let's see, Jacob Molina says 99.99% of naturalistic artists outside of comics use reference. Right. Even the greats like Frazetta. But if you have a good grasp of anatomy, you can make the figure your own. And I think that's exactly right. Like, you know, if you asked me to draw a figure, I can do that. Can I imbue that figure with a consistent, you know, sort of facial features so that like Reed Richards looks like Reed Richards in each panel and he has emotions that are believable and not like weirdly exaggerated or something like that? Well, that's where I think that somebody like Greg Land runs into some trouble. Recenter that. Let's see. Bren Ross Film Productions. Excited for the Halloween movie trailer coming out tomorrow? I would say interested. I like a lot of the Halloween movies. I love the first one. Excited? Not yet. You know, maybe after I see it. It can be kind of easy to get wrong. So I'm tentatively excited. I like Danny McBride, and he's like an executive producer or writer on it. So, you know, I think he's definitely got a shot at coming up with a good idea. It's good that director John Carpenter is sort of involved. I believe he's like a producer on it. Yeah, so hopefully it's good. Did you see the Thing remake that was secretly not a remake? I did see that. I didn't. It was. I mean, it didn't come close to the original. It was okay for what it was. It you know, it doesn't deserve a second watch. I'm going to zoom in. That I'm just fiddling with the controls a little here. Okay. No Hurt Feline says, I have the Scream Factory Collector's Edition. It was released not too long ago. For The Thing? Yeah. Mohammed says, not sci-fi, Chris, but have you ever watched Sleepaway Camp? Rubbish Friday the 13th clone, but the ending is worth it. I couldn't sleep for a week. Yeah, I have seen it. And I agree. It's like, it's kind of, it's a very disturbing ending. Mostly for how it's presented. That guttural sort of growl from Angela is pretty creepy. Boy, it looks cheap. It does not look good, Sleepaway Camp. I don't think I've ever rewatched it. But I like the Friday the 13th movies, pretty much all of them. They're kind of garbage, I know. But I like them. Let's see. Yeah, that ending. People are saying. On the subject of John Carpenter's sci-fi horror, Prince of Darkness is pretty cool. You know what? I've actually never seen Prince of Darkness. I think I've seen every other John Carpenter movie, but I haven't seen Prince of Darkness. So someday I'll have to correct that. Yeah, that's weird now that I think it's weird when you realize that you've seen a lot of movies by a certain actor or director, and then all of a sudden there's like one that isn't in there. You're like, wait, how did it happen that I saw almost everything by this person but missed one? Yeah. Stanley Kubrick was like that for a long time. I really like Stanley Kubrick's movies, and then like one day I was like, I've never seen what was the last one I saw? I think Spartacus, actually. Which was, I believe, the last film he made for a studio instead of, you know, being an auteur and making it himself. But Spartacus is good. Spartacus has a great structure to it. Am I centered? Move this over a little. Are those two Deadman, or are they two different characters? Yes, these are meant to be. I'm going to color it so that, like, this is Boston Brand when he was a living acrobat, but like the major focus is on him as Deadman. Excuse me. Wow, that came out of nowhere. I always sneeze twice. Do you have something like that where, like everybody sort of sneezes the same way, however it is, or everybody laughs the same way? For me, when I sneeze, I always sneeze twice. Yeah, Riley Desert Grizzly is saying that Sleepaway Camp is almost like a John Waters film. Yeah, but certainly nowhere near as good. Even when John Waters is trashy, he's like doing interesting experimental things. Wow, where is that coming from? Oh, it's like all of a sudden my my sinuses are just a little plugged up. Just sort of came out of nowhere. I wonder if I'm allergic to beer. Diego says, I always sneeze when I go into the sun for some reason. I've heard that people can be slightly allergic to the sun and it makes them sneeze. I've heard that, but I've never actually witnessed that. But yeah, that's a thing. My goal here is to really emphasize the musculature. I feel like there have been artists that have drawn this character. I feel like I looked into it before I decided to draw. I feel like a lot of characters have a lot of artists have illustrated Deadman looking sort of skeletal. Or they've drawn him sort of traditional, really strong superhero. I feel like I didn't see a lot that was sort of just emphasizing the musculature. So I thought, a little zombie-like maybe, if you can emphasize that. So I'm sure that there are other artists that have done that. I'm just saying that was my goal, to make it like a little unique, a little bit my own. What's the story of Deadman, like his origin and stuff? Deadman was a circus performer, like a trapeze artist, and a hitman named Hook killed him. I don't know why, because I'm not super familiar with this character. And Boston Brand, that's his real name, worshipped a Hindu goddess, a fictional one, named something like Rama Krishna. It was Rama something with a K. And it's made up. That's why I don't remember it. Like, it wasn't a real god. And the god sort of brought him back to life as a type of ghost that can possess the living. He can enter their bodies and gain access to their memories and stuff, and try to solve crimes that way. It's different. It feels honestly like the kind of thing that would work really well as a TV show. Because you could do a story sort of like Quantum Leap. He takes over somebody's body, and then you just every week use the same actor once he's possessed somebody. And he solves the crime of the week while living their life. I could see that working anyway. think I might be slightly allergic to this cheap beer. Because I sneezed and my nose is sort of runny, and like I've been feeling fine all day. Like that just sort of came out of nowhere. Oh well, sorry. All right. Every once in a while when I go quiet, it's just because I'm mostly like sort of focusing on maybe a small detail or something, and I get lost in it. And if anybody's watched my streams before, you know that that's where I really lose track of time. Is if I start like doing detail. I was recently doing Godzilla, and I got lost in like doing like all sorts of bumps and stuff on him, and I lose track of time very quickly. So what I should be doing is sort of throwing down big black areas and making sure that the form and structure to all of this is correct and looks good, and then go back for the detail. That's just one of my personal bad habits, is getting lost in small details. It's fun for me. That's all I can say. Whew. Okay, Brian says he saw some 90s Deadman at his local comic store recently. I want to say that Kelly Jones was drawing the title in the 90s. Is that correct? I know he did it for a while, and I thought his style probably would work pretty well. He's got a style with a lot of dark shadows. I feel like that could suit the character pretty well. What other new comics are good, like that I should be reading when I get some money? Which could be a while, but what recommendations of sort of new titles or new announcements for titles excite you guys? Ooh. I sort of remember the remake of The Thing. That's from CB4. Yeah, it's not that great. Brian A says he still watches Quantum Leap when it comes on a local channel. Kenji Blackstar says, "Do you feel they should have brought They should have brought back Nightwing, or do you like Deadman more?" I don't have a personal connection with either of those characters, to be honest. They're fine. I'm drawing this at somebody's request. I'm not overly familiar with Deadman. And Nightwing, I'm more familiar with Nightwing from either Teen Titans or Batman stories. I've never read a Nightwing solo title. So, I don't know that I consider myself an expert on Dick Grayson as Nightwing. But I have read, the version I know best is from the Marv Wolfman and George Perez issues of New Teen Titans, and then whoever was doing the Titans books by the 90s, which I can't really remember right now. I read those books a lot. But I never read a solo Nightwing title. If you ask me to choose, who do I like more between Deadman and Nightwing, I will go with Nightwing because I know him a little bit more, but I wouldn't claim to be an expert. Jacob Molina says, "Please God, read The Collector by Sergio Tappi." Huh, that's interesting. Not overly familiar. I'll have to look that up. Thanks. Always appreciate a recommendation. I'm going to work on the head for a minute. Randy, my friend Randy says, have to say I'm doing some art along with you. This is really cool. You know, I've heard that from several people that have like joined in on the live streams to say like, hey, I'm drawing and just am like listening to you in the background. And I love that idea that like, you know, I'm drawing with someone even if we're not in the same room. So that's really cool to hear, Randy. Um, I love drawing with other people from time to time. It's not like that I produce my best work, but I'm talking about going to life drawing and drink and draws, things like that. I love just hanging out with other people, having a beer and drawing. I think it's so much fun. Kind of stuttering there, aren't I? All right, let's see here. I got to use a finer tool. Eyes and hands are so important. You just don't ever want to make a mistake on either of those areas. So sometimes you got to slow down and use a finer brush or pen or something. Because the hands and the eyes are where you get the most expressiveness. That's where you find the humanity and have people relate to what you're drawing the best. So that's a little messier than I wanted, but better than if I used a big fat brush pen. Let's see. Maybe actually once I erase the pencil marks, it'll clean up a little. Come on, Chris. Don't screw this up. Some questions. Oh boy, I'm sorry that I can't keep up with the chat today. You guys are asking some great questions. Chris, great drawing. Are you self-taught or did you take any art classes? I've never gone to art school, but I have taken, you know, let's see, it's been a long time actually since I've taken an art class. Last time would have been in college, and that's been a long time since I've been in college. And even that wasn't like purely illustration. It was like sort of just a general arts class. But one thing I will do is, like I was just saying, like if there's a drink and draw or a doctor's sketches where there's a model, I like to go to those and sort of brush up on my life drawing skills. In March, I was on a trip to Japan, as anybody that watches my channel might recall. I did an episode while I was in there. Yeah. Anyway, one fun thing that I did was on the last day that I was in Tokyo. There was a Dr. Sketchies being run by English-speaking like expats that lived over there, Canadians and Americans, and so I went and I actually happened to bump into a friend of mine from when I lived in Washington D.C. who I hadn't seen in 4 years, and he and I were in Tokyo at the same time, and we went to Dr. Sketchies and drew the burlesque dancer. That was the last time I did life drawing was March, and now it's June, so it's been a few months. But I like to go to those. That's where I sort of try to work on my skills. Riley Desert Grizzly says, I've been told it's frustrating how much Iron Fist is killing it in the comics compared to his Netflix version. I'm not on the up and up with his comics. Oh, Iron Fist has some really cool comics. I love two eras. I love the initial 70s comics, very sort of the era, the sort of karate and kung fu exploitation craze. And then Ed Brubaker and Matt Fraction teamed up to work on the title in the I guess the early aughts, the early 2000s, and they added a lot of cool new elements to it. So I definitely recommend the Immortal Iron Fist that Brubaker and Fraction worked on together, and then I recommend maybe like finding something along the lines of those like Marvel Essential big thick trade paperbacks that collect a character in chronological order, and it's printed on newsprint in black and white, so it's cheap. I think that's a pretty fun way to read a bunch of his initial stories. Yeah, I'm a fan of Iron Fist. Iron Fist is, not like all-time favorite, but he's definitely a character that I have like an almost absurd like for. And yeah, the Netflix version wasn't fantastic. I didn't think it was garbage. I thought it was watchable. It's not great. It's not great. It's yeah. It's got problems, unfortunately. Hope that looks cool. CB for Public Enemy lists a ton of good DC comics. Let's see. Let me scroll up. I'm curious what you just said. Justice League, Deathstroke versus Batman, Green Lantern, Damage, The Terrifics, Cyberfrog. I don't know Cyberfrog. And Hawkman are some good comics to pick up. Okay. What's your logic to the way you shade? I'm trying to do it as simple as one major light source basically coming at, sorry, this isn't, sort of coming at this angle. So everything on this underside gets shaded a lot more. And I'm trying to emphasize his musculature, so I'm doing a lot of sort of like feathery lines and just trying to follow like the way muscles wrap. So hopefully when I'm done, there'll be some consistent shading, and he'll have a texture that's kind of like lots of just exposed muscly tissue. That's sort of what I'm going for. I don't know how effective I'm able to do it. I'm not a professional artist with that kind of experience. It's sort of a new idea, but it's what I'm trying to do. I'm kind of happy with it. I mean, I can only draw as well as I can draw, which is, you hope to get better if you draw more frequently, but you have to also sort of accept that you're only so good. Do you have to accept that? I don't know. Maybe that's bullshit. Maybe you should not. That sounds like settling, and I don't think that you should settle. People watching this will be like, I like Chris's material. He teaches me to settle. However good I did it is good enough. That's not what I'm trying to impart. I'm going to take a moment here to erase some of my underlying pencil to sort of clean up a couple areas. Let's see. Riley Desert Grizzly says, I only know Iron Fist original Heroes for Hire, sure, but I'll have to check out Immortal Iron Fist, and definitely a collection. Oh yeah, I should have said, like, the 70s, Power Man and Iron Fist comic was also quite fun. But the creative team would change up on it kind of frequently. I mean, I think Tony Isabella wrote it. I think Joe Duffy wrote it. I'm pretty sure Chris Claremont did some of his early work illustrating. Chris Claremont. I meant John Byrne. I was thinking of them as a duo. because I'm a little tired. Or senile. Take your pick. Okay. I'm smudging some of the pencil here, so I'm just sort of trying to clean that up. It's probably not showing up on camera, but I can see it and it bothers me. Alright, and I'll also do this D. I'm doing a small cheat and saying that the D somehow shows up enough that you can't see his muscles. Who knows how that works? A No Heart Feline says, I think drawing from many references is good to build a mental catalog. I agree. But using iterative drawing helps me sculpt references I remember into unique styles or positions. Well said. Well said. Diego Alejandro points out that Chip Zdarsky is killing it with Marvel 2-in-1, and the current Iron Fist series is pretty great. You know, I'm not reading it. I'm not reading a lot of comics right now. I just don't have the money for it. But I do like Chip Zdarsky's work, so that's cool to hear. And Diego adds, Avengers by Jason Aaron is pretty cool. Again, like Jason Aaron is generally a writer that I do enjoy his work, so that's great to hear. I'll probably someday catch up in a trade paperback or on digital comics. Adrian Paler says, good morning from Cambridge. Good morning. All right, Riley, good night. Thank you very much for dropping in. I appreciate it. I'm trying to think. I think I'm going to just completely erase all this stuff that I have over his belt and just keep that nice and clean as well. I think that'll look cool once I color it. We'll see. I've never been to Cambridge. I've been to England. Only once, I'm afraid. I'd love to go back. I would really love to sort of drive north. I mean, I mostly stayed in London. I also took a train out to Wales. I loved it. This is for Adrian, who just joined us. I just find your country quite beautiful and interesting. Big fan of a lot of the entertainment that you guys create. So, I mean, a lot of very talented comic book writers and artists, of course, but also, you know, a lot of your TV. Definitely a fan of Doctor Who. And yeah, I like England quite a bit. But I was saying I'd love to just sort of drive up north. I'd love to sort of explore Manchester and even go so far as, like, you know, drive all the way to Edinburgh, Scotland. That would be nice. I think I'd have a really good time doing that. I still haven't decided whether I'm going to give this guy boots or bare feet. I don't know if anybody has a preference out there, but I'm still having trouble deciding on that one. Karen, I didn't realize you were there, Karen G. She says Wales Saucepan. I don't know what that means. Maybe that's Welsh. You sound more worldly than I do. I'm grateful to Karen because she was showing up in a bunch of my live stream chat rooms and kept mentioning, not kept mentioning, but a few times mentioned the manga My Hero Academia. And a few other people had mentioned it too, to their credit. That's why I sort of recognized that it stuck in my head. I love that manga. That's just one of my current favorites. If you've ever read like classic New Mutants comics from the 80s, it really reminds me of that. Because it's about like superpowered teens going to school to learn how to use their powers. And there's supervillains and problems like that, and then there's competitions and classes where they try to become more powerful. Anyway, Karen talk that one up, and I really enjoy it. So if you like manga, or you liked New Mutants, and you're looking for something new, superhero story with really good art and a fun, exciting story, characters that become deeper over time, I recommend My Hero Academia quite a bit. I really like it. Not my all-time favorite manga, but my favorite manga that's currently being translated into English. Chris, do you have a blog for your art? No, Mohammed, I really don't. Way back in the day I did, but it's no longer online. Yeah, it's just either these YouTube live streams, or occasionally I will post them, like a drawing or sketch or something that I'm working on in the art world, to my Instagram, my personal Instagram, not a Comic Tropes Instagram, but to Chris Piers, all one word, my name, ChrisPiers. But there's not a lot, you know. I wish I had more time to draw, because then I could improve. These live streams are the majority of the time that I have to draw these days. And I sort of set this time aside because it's a way to interact with all of you, and learn what people are thinking about or talking about in the world of comics and pop culture, so that my show stays relevant to people's interests, and a way for me to just sort of say thank you. I appreciate everybody's support. So most of the drawing these days for me is this. And I don't know where most of my art is these days. Like, physical art, I probably haven't kept most of it. Yeah. Have you seen, this is from Awesome Shades, have you ever seen Naoki Urasawa's Manben series? He goes around and interviews other mangaka. There's lots of episodes on YouTube. I suggest you give them a watch if you're interested. I've seen them all. I'm a massive fan of Naoki Urasawa's work. And since you brought it up, my personal goal for my YouTube channel has always been, if I could get it to a healthy subscriber base, which would be admittedly in the at least tens of thousands, probably 50, 60,000, maybe 100,000 it might take, if my channel ever had that kind of explosive growth, so that I had a revenue stream. I do have a lot of connections in the comic book world, and I've always wanted to do my version of that show, where I would basically make, instead of me going through a comic book and discussing the techniques and tropes that somebody used, the history of a character, I would literally spend, a day or so hanging out, observing a writer or an artist that works in comics, document their process, sit down and have an interview, and ask them why they did certain things the way they did, how they manage their time, what they use for inspiration, how they, all that kind of stuff, like the actual work. That's what I'd love, love, love to do with my channel, is really, really sort of turn it into an interview documentary type show where, and I might still do some of my own comic tropes type episodes, but that's what I'd personally love to do with my channel if I could get to a point where I had enough viewers. That's always been my my dream for the channel. And Mohammed likes that idea. Where is Deadman from, asks Foof. Ryan Sargent is here and also asks about him. Let's see. Okay, I'll catch up to a few of the other questions. Quick summary. Boston Brand up here was an acrobat in a circus. A hitman killed him. This guy, Boston Brand, the acrobat, like worshipped a fictional Hindu god, and she sort of brought him back as Deadman, who's essentially a ghost and can possess living people to sort of solve crimes that have taken place in their life. It's a the actual concept is very sort of procedural, you know, every week sort of solving that week's crime. Although some writers, I guess, have tried to imbue him with more mythology and more traditional superheroics with a villain and stuff. But I think he's a little too unique for that, except in maybe a team situation. All right, I missed a few things. Chris, have you heard about the Japanese illustrator Bengus? He's a character designer, illustrator that works for Capcom. Yeah, definitely. No hurt feeling. I've definitely heard of Bengus. Very talented. I don't think I own anything by Bengus, actually, but I once heard, and this could be incorrect, so definitely don't take this as a fact, but I once heard that Bengus was actually the name for maybe a small studio of artists, not just one artist. But someone out there that knows for sure can absolutely correct me if I'm wrong or confirm if that's correct. I don't know. No hurt feelings says I loved seeing Bengus's interpretations of Marvel characters in Marvel vs. Capcom 2, X-Men vs. Street Fighter. Yeah, great art. Totally agree. Best part. CB4 says Deadman's real name is Boston Brand. He was created by Jack Kirby, I believe. That could be so, but I thought it was somebody I think Carmine Infantino drew the first issue, actually. And I'm trying to remember the writer, but it's not coming to me. It wasn't Denny O'Neil. I think that one creative team wrote the very first issue, and then a new creative team took over for 7 issues or so, I think. Google it. I'm not an expert. I'm not doing an episode on Deadman right now, so I haven't really researched it too much. This is a request from somebody that supports me on Patreon. If you support me at the $20 level, which is pretty amazing. I didn't expect. I've got a limited number of slots there. But if you support me at that level, you get to both choose a topic for a show that I'll do, and I said that I'll, draw them something. Not that's necessarily an incentive, but I feel like it's the least I can do for somebody that's willing to support me at that level. Support the show. So this person requested Deadman, and I thought that sounded like a really cool challenge, because I know what Deadman looks like. I don't necessarily know his stories, but I was like, I love the idea of drawing Deadman. That's a cool one. So I'm grateful. If I get a request for a character that I don't know at all, that sounds intimidating, because then you have to really do some research and a lot of preliminary sketches to make sure you're getting the character on model. Anyway. It's coming along. I feel pretty happy with a good amount of this upper body. All Lucky 7 says, if you get the opportunity of doing interviews, please go talk to Adam Hughes. There's a mini multi-part documentary with him called Anatomy of a Sketch. It's on YouTube. It's pretty great, but also pretty old. Oh, never heard about it, but I'd like to watch that. Adam Hughes is really talented. Foof says, I love the shadows. Are you tapping into Mignola? I wish. Mignola is my favorite. I think I'm doing more feathering, with like these lines than Mignola does. Mignola is like pretty brave about like throwing down big splotches of black, and it's like this is shadow, this is light. Not a lot of feathering or cross hatching or anything like that. Like it's just either light or dark. And I really admire how brave he is because I also love the result. Big fan of Mignola. Big fan. One of my personal, like, just absolute favorite artists in comics. I guess not everybody loves him, but yeah, I definitely do. And this is probably going to look a little awkward, like this littler character laying over this big character, but I'm planning on adding some, what do you call it, colors. I'm going to use Prismacolors to try to separate and distinguish things a bit. I'm trying to find a certain brush, excuse me. Ryan Sargent says, thanks for the info. I'm not big on procedurals. Probably explains why I don't know about the character. Visually, though, he gives me Black Hand vibes. Oh, cool. Well, thanks. That makes me happy. I'm going to flip around because I just need a moment to sort of lay down some thick blacks and not do fine detail. Hand is just the tiniest bit cramped up, so this won't be the most exciting part, but I'll try to take a couple questions and keep things moving, right? Where's my beer? Do you happen to like more DC Vertigo character stories? That's an interesting question, Foof. I think I definitely went through a period really in the 90s where I was reading a lot of Vertigo. Preacher, Hellblazer, Sandman, what else was coming out then? All sorts of stuff. So there was a time when I read a lot of Vertigo. These days I'm just not reading a lot of new comics regularly. I sort of wait until I hear some good reviews or something like that, or I decide to do an episode on a character or topic, and then I start doing some research. But yeah, I'm just in a financial situation these days where I really just can't afford to get comics or anything. I can't I can't buy a lot of new entertainment. I bring in a small amount of money with Patreon and YouTube, and I try to set that money aside to get new comics or pay for the things that it takes to keep the show running, like a subscription to Adobe, etc. So I'm not always like the most knowledgeable about current comics. I know there's a lot of channels out there that like do reviews of current comics, whether good or bad. I like to jump around more because I do still like reading comics a lot. I love the medium of comics. There's so many creators out there that I really do care about. So I like to read current comics when I can and when something's been well reviewed. But I can't like go every week and pick up comics. I just can't afford anything like that. So I'm not always the most knowledgeable about every current comic. So instead I jump around. You've probably noticed, Golden Age, Silver Age, Bronze Age, Modern Age, foreign comics, American comics, independent, mainstream. I really try to vary it with like all of that, a writer, an artist, a topic. And consequently, that means that certain episodes of my show are not watched nearly as much as others, because not everybody's going to care about every single topic that I choose. I can accept that, but yeah, that's what I do, and I'm not always the most knowledgeable about modern comics. But a lot of times when I do these live streams, that you'll notice that is a question I ask people. I'm like, what are you reading these days? What's good? Because I'm always looking for recommendations. I love comics, and I'd love to. I want to read as many as I can. Fables, yeah, thank you. Muhammad Abdallah points out Fables was a Vertigo comic, and I did read that one. I really, really enjoyed it too. Great comic. Where's my... I'm having a lot of fun with my brush pen tonight, like my fine brush pen. I feel like I've got a good amount of control right now on it. It's a good feeling. Surprised it didn't get a live-action series yet, Muhammad says about Fables. I think that at one point Fables was pretty close to getting adapted when it was, still being printed. And I think what stopped it was when ABC decided to do Once Upon a Time. It's a pretty similar idea. They've got all the Disney versions, you could say, of various myths and fables to draw on, but they also draw on stuff that they, hadn't done as Disney, Wizard of Oz and stuff. And it's a pretty similar idea because it's set in modern day and you've got access to all those characters. So I think that's really what stopped Fables from being adapted. But Fables is the far superior story. I mean, there's a lot of great mythology with the characterizations in Fables. I mean, Bigby the Big Bad Wolf and their version of Snow White and Rose Red and Frog King. Geppetto. Oh my god, their version of Geppetto is fascinating. Anyway, yeah, you know what? That's a comic I really love. So maybe someday I'll have to do an episode about Fables and how it's got some... it's got quite a bit of potential for an adaptation of all sorts of kinds. I mean, you could do a lot with an adaptation of the story Fables tells. I feel like you could do it as like movies, TV show, animation. You could do it as a play. You could do it as a musical. You could do it as a musical, and it would be pretty badass. What's your opinion on superhero logos? I think that some superheroes shouldn't have one. Batman, for instance. He should scrap that bat symbol and let his silhouette itself be the bat symbol. That's an interesting question, All Lucky 7, and let me talk about that for just a moment. There's a reason beyond, how cool it looks for why somebody like Batman has a logo, and that's so that DC Comics can exert more creative ownership over their intellectual property. If they have a logo, that can be trademarked. The more things you do with popular characters to keep their copyrights, trademarks, registrations potentially, the more things you do to maintain that legal ownership, which can include things like logos and slogans and things like that, the better chance you have to, in turn, defend your property if someone ever tries to rip it off or make a knockoff. So there are sincere business concerns when you've got somebody as popular as Batman. I understand what you're saying from a logical character point of view, and that could look really cool. And they could still potentially do exactly what you're talking about for maybe a spin-off type of title. But there is a reason. And that said, there's a second part that I wanted to mention, which is that the titles these days for a lot of comics, the title itself, it used to be pretty simplistic. You just had like a really good artist to draw something with a three-dimensional look to it or something like that. But these days with Adobe Illustrator and stuff, you can create some very, very precise, measured graphics. And I'm trying to remember, there's a name of a particular guy that does logos for all the comics these days. He does like just the title for stuff like DC Comics, Valiant Comics, Marvel, Ninja Turtles. His name isn't coming to me. He used to be an artist in England that worked on like a couple 2000 AD stories, and instead he sort of transitioned into doing the logos for most comic books. He's really talented. Marvel Studios had a version of their logo. It says Marvel, and if you look at it, in 2008 and stuff, in like Iron Man, it looks a certain way. If you look at it today, there have been very tiny adjustments to make, like the angle that like the A and the V are at, like make sure that they're at the same exact angle. Make sure that like the width of each character is the correct width, and like the blocks on the E, make sure that they're the same height. It's pretty specific, interesting stuff to make it look good. How do you decide on the topic of a comic trope? A lot of different ways. I do occasionally, like every other month, I have a poll on my Patreon, and I let people that are my patrons vote. I try to sort of have something generally in common, like maybe all foreign comics or all Golden Age comics or all popular current writers. I try to have something like that, and then like give them 3 or 4 choices. Aside from that, though, obviously I come up with the vast majority myself, and I basically just, anytime I think of a writer or artist that I either really like, really don't like, or has an interesting tidbit of history, or like, created one really interesting thing, I go, well, that's a potential topic to research and delve into. So, I just keep a list. I just have a list. And I always have a calendar booked, like about 3 months ahead. I'm always thinking about 3 months ahead for what I want to do. And I look at all of those and I try to say like, okay, well, if I did it this way, that would be like discussing 3 modern writers in a row. That's not enough variety for what I want to do. So maybe if I swap this with, discussing an indie 80s comic like Ninja Turtles instead of, a writer like Chip Zdarsky, like that's the kind of thing I'm always sort of thinking about. And I also will try sometimes to coincide the topic with something that's coming out in pop culture. So like when Avengers Infinity War was going to come out, I didn't directly just, review the Avengers Infinity War comic or something. That I could have. But what I did is I just, found a really unique Avengers comic to review. And, the new Cloak and Dagger show debuted, so I went back and looked at, their origin and the writing of Bill Mantlo. So, I'm not trying to just review like, oh, this is the Cloak and Dagger comic you should read. This is their origin, and I'm just going to like read each page and make a joke about each page. I tried to do something a little more, but I am sort of playing off of something that's coming out in pop culture sometimes. So some of that, when I'm deciding what to do, will come from what is going on in the world. So that gives me a lot to potentially draw from in terms of topics and creators and ideas like that. Thanks for the question. I like that. Ryan Hughes, thank you. Randy Stone points out the The graphic designer I'm talking about, Ryan Hughes, if you look him up, has designed so many logos that you're familiar with. If you read comics, you've seen a lot of logos by Ryan Hughes. Talented guy. Really, really interesting work. Yeah, I admire it. Thanks, Randy. Anybody see that Russian short film Major Grom? No, I haven't even heard of that one, I'm afraid. Ryan, the Fables video game that you're talking about, like I know that's interesting, but I just want to make sure that like people reading the chat know that's separate from the Vertigo comic book, right? Unless there was an adaptation of the comic book that I'm not aware of. I know that there was a video game called Fable. Maybe there's something I don't know. No Hurt Feline says, like contemporary anime, it's asking a lot to expect anyone to have a complete knowledge of all contemporary comics. There's way too much nowadays to consume it all. Of course. That said, there are some channels where like people, I believe, pick up a lot of current comics and will give like brief synopses for their reviews, I believe. I like to have humor in my episodes, but not every episode has humor, and that's because it's not that hard to just pick a comic that got bad reviews and describe every page and do punchlines. I mean there's work to it, but it's not as much work as discussing the full sort of context and history of the character or the writer, etc. And so sometimes, if you watch my episodes, I may only sort of I'll be reading through one issue, but I use that as a jumping off point to discuss, a lot of comic book history by the, person or topic in question, instead of just, reading you each page, because you guys can read each page and make jokes that might be a lot better than mine. I like sitting down and writing jokes. It's sometimes the hardest thing, though, is I do have a respect for places that will review a bad comic and make jokes about it, because sometimes something is just absurd, and it's like, well, to make a joke based on something absurd, you sort of have to do something other than just pointing out the absurdity. Like, that's just lampshading. That might work once. Instead, you have to think metaphorically and talk about, come up with a comparison or something like that that's even more absurd, but relatable. That's not easy. I think that for instance, the late night talk shows that have to talk about current events and politics, that's a huge challenge to be coming up with jokes based on how absurd our world is, every single night. That's tough. Yeah. Lucky7 points out that he's heard of Chip Kidd and Nate Picos doing comic book logos. Yeah, both talented guys, for sure. And then he says, interesting, I didn't know of Ryan Hughes. And by the way, if anyone's curious, just watching this, it's Ryan spelled with an I. Ryan Hughes, he's a graphic and type designer. Yeah, these days that's pretty much all he does. He's really talented at what he does. Maybe the best. Ryan Sargent says, called The Wolf Among Us, and you play as Bigby and solve a murder. Those games that are they've done them for Walking Dead and Game of Thrones and Batman. Right, sorry, I didn't realize that they'd done one for Fables, where those are the ones where you maybe have some quick time events and mostly choose the dialogue to choose the direction of the story and like, you know, who lives and dies. Okay, I didn't realize, I'm sorry, that Fables had done one of those. So you were correct and I was thinking of the wrong thing. Yeah, I'm just I'm gonna take away his boots. I think it would be just different and unique. So I'm gonna, and maybe, you know what? I'll still add a line to indicate that he has a costume, but he's just not wearing boots, because it's more interesting to me. In fact, that means that I could also say that he's not wearing gloves, and I could give him like thumbnail and maybe even like some more musculature than over here. I could like give him more lines. It's worth a try anyway. I don't know if it'll look good or not. Gotta experiment a little. See what happens. I'll color it differently. Good morning, says Hankification. I love that there's so many people like in like Europe and stuff that are waking up while I'm just like, yeah, it's getting late, but it's not that late. And but I'm creating a morning show for people. I should have like a coffee mug here and just be like, you know, hey, good morning. Oh, it's been a crazy day. Let's look at today's events. This Deadman character. What a goof. Let's see. Muhammad says Grom is based on a comic, a plainclothes police officer who's also a super genius and has an analytical mind even in combat. The short is really good. There's a feature coming out soon. Oh, so that was Grom. Like, I know you said that was a Russian short film, and you're saying that it's based on a comic. Was the Grom comic also Russian? Because I'll be honest, I don't know anything about Russian comic books. Diego says it's like 1 a.m. where I live. Let's see, 12:01. Okay, so you're in a central time zone. Gotcha. Interesting. Grom. Well, I'll keep that in mind. Thanks, Mohammed. Sounds like you like it, and I always appreciate a good recommendation. Oh, you know what? Let me adjust where I'm sorry, I was just sort of illustrating some of this stuff down here. So sometimes I forget to move the page. Not good. Kind of like the main thing I should be doing if I'm going to live stream the art, and I'm not doing it. Because if he's a ghost, like, he doesn't really even need a costume, so why would he need shoes or gloves? He's a ghost, sort of. Oh, I'm gonna take away his boots and gloves and just say that he's got he just doesn't have those. And I think it'll show up like that once I start coloring him in a little bit. Because I'm actually just about done with what I want to ink, I think. And I think that the rest of the depth and texture will come from some markers, some Prismacolors, which I'm not an expert at, but I do really love playing with them. So that's what we're going to do. You're along for the ride whether you want it or not. Have you guys heard about this new drink called Capriccio Bubbly Sangria? Now, I am not endorsing this, but it is, if you remember Four Loko, like from like, I don't know, like 7 or 8 years ago, when it was like new, it's sort of like that. Like this new stuff, Capriccio Bubbly Sangria, is 13.9% alcohol by volume, and it's just like a really cheap, fruity, bubbly, fizzy alcohol. I tried some. It's kind of gross, to be honest, but at 13.9%, it gets you, you feel it pretty fast. It's so, I mean, I guess the word for it would sort of be ghetto, you know? I mean, it's a trashy drink. I'm actually thinking it's so funny. Maybe I should, I'd love to get some actually for drinking on the show, but they actually don't carry it anywhere here in Washington State anymore. And like the shipping on it is like $18 or something. I just don't have that kind of money. So I'd love to like drink some on the show. I could definitely find a funny use for drinking something that powerful, and I think it would be kind of funny, but you know, maybe someday. Can't do it right now. But I didn't know if you'd heard about it. Hi, Slyfly guy. Hello, Nuzzy Lloyd. Nuzzy Lloyd. Let's see. Foof says, you like horror comics? I do. I checked out the newish Animal Man series with the rot creatures and the red creatures, which are great creature designs. I like it a lot, but I still miss the Morrison humor. You know, one of the few New 52 comics I read before Rebirth, like when it was New 52, my friend Travel Foreman was illustrating the first few issues of Animal Man. I'm trying to remember if Jeff Lemire was writing it then or if he took over. It's been too long, I don't remember. But I thought that my friend enough about him being my friend. I thought Travel drew some really creepy creatures from the rot and the red. And I'd never really seen that to that extent in like, you know, Morrison's run or anything else like that. So I like that a lot. I think that's cool. All right, I'm going to actually take an eraser to some of this. Jürgen Ferkelat says, we Germans drink sangria out of buckets, usually on vacation in Mallorca. I'm jealous. Sangria is great. This drink it's called sangria. I don't think that makes it sangria. The good sangria is a bunch of actual fruit and some good wine, and it mixes so well. Anyway, Chris, do you enjoy any comics or animation that has a kitsch or campy appeal? Kind of like 70s, 80s, Hanna-Barbera, Filmation, Rankin Bass, etc. Oh yeah, absolutely. Because that's what, you know, I grew up with. So I'm trying to think of like, okay, one that I really liked when I was young was I'm pretty sure this was a Hanna-Barbera one. Shazam, the genie. It was like, the story was like two kids found a ring that could summon a genie when two halves were put together, like a brother and sister, I think. And, you know, if they could summon Shazam, but they also, when they found these rings, somehow got transported to like ancient Egypt or something like that. And Shazam's like, I can do anything for you except take you home. You'll have to figure out like a different magic way to get home. And so every week was them flying on their flying camel called Kabubi, and they'd meet like a really mean king or warlord or something, and they'd get themselves, you know, like in a lot of trouble. Like the guy would be like, you're an infidel, I will kill you. You know, it was really basic stuff. And then they would just be like, well, I guess we should call Shazam. It's like, yeah, you should have Shazam with you all the time. They put their rings together, and Shazam would show up and do ridiculous things like turn people into like basketballs and like turn himself into a rocket and go like, oh, little masters, boom. Sorry, that was Jeannie that would like nod her head, but he would just sort of stand there and be like, oh, and the animation was like lots of repeated frames and stuff. It was pretty cheap, but that was one that I watched as a kid that was campy and kitschy, and I sort of enjoyed it because of that. So, yeah, I don't know if anybody else ever watched that one. Nizzaloid says, I'm German, and I'd like to make clear that not everybody does that, because Jürgen had just said that they drink sangria out of buckets. Okay, so I've got two very different opinions by Germans on how much sangria they drink. Let's see. Henkification says, I remember a fused pile of monkeys or something in Morrison's run. That's right. That was because they used Beast, or he used Beast, which I did an episode on, a very short episode about how ridiculous Beast is. Because Beast was a pretty bad creation. He was really, like, just sort of like, oh, you know, he got these magic powers, and now he's going to protect Africa, and he is like a rich white kid. Yeah, so it's a little problematic, and today, like, we're like, oh, well, why couldn't it have been his best friend who was, like, you know, the prince of the country? Why couldn't he have gotten the powers and been the hero? The writers just didn't think like that at the time. Anyway, yeah, so Morrison had Animal Man. He was writing Animal Man, and he was like, oh, I'm going to use this bizarre character. And what Beast's powers are is he can fuse together animals into a new beast that he calls a chimera. And he had gone crazy because I think he had been poisoned with anthrax. So that was actually a really interesting sort of matchup. Animal Man could draw... Oh, and I should say that Beast could do just like Animal Man. He could also draw the abilities of animals that he was near. So, yeah, that was a cool story. It was weird. All right, enough of this. Shazam from Hanna-Barbera. Characters designed, as so many other shows of that era, by Alex Toth. That's from All Lucky 7. I love Alex Toth. That's somebody I should do an episode about, actually. Oh, wow. He was an amazing artist. Amazing. And inspired and influenced so many other artists. Sorry, I'm looking for a color reference that I did. Foof says, in Mexico, we mix it with canned fruit, Sprite, and some cheap wine, and we call it a day. Yeah, I've done that myself. I have done that myself. That's interesting. So I've got 2 people in the chat room from Germany right now, and I've got 2 people from Mexico. We're going pretty global in this relatively small chat room. I love it. Shrish Shubang says, love you, Chris. Your videos are awesome. Thank you. That's very kind of you. Nezaloid says, your line art is gorgeous. Well, thank you. Yeah, you spelled it right. I'm always hesitant with shadows, which is a shame. Me too. It's intimidating, isn't it? Yeah, it's intimidating. And I don't know that I necessarily did great, but I think some of this looks cool, so I'm happy with that. Now I'm going to do some colors. I love working with, I don't know how many of you play around with this stuff, but I love these Copic markers. They really just blend really, really well. And I'm just trying to choose sort of some skin colors here for the version of Boston Brand that's like an acrobat, a circus performer. I'm looking for another color in here. Ah, there it is. Okay. And so now we get to do some colors, which is sometimes some of the most fun. Yeah. Now the one trick with these is that these things blend really, really well, but every once in a while, all of a sudden too much ink can gather in the brush tip and it'll bleed all over the place. That's very, very frustrating. So, yeah, just sort of adding some skin color to this guy. And then sort of thinking it through, like where I want to put what color. Okay. Sometimes you have to take a minute to really think through your light source. Keep it consistent. Basically, I'm using this one color that's called Pale Fruit Pink, pale fruit pink, oh, that's hard to say fast, as sort of my darker highlights. And then I'm going to color most of this guy's body with another color that I have called cherry white, which is pretty close to a Caucasian skin tone. All right. No Hurt Feelings says, Chris, I think your content is very appealing because your critiques never come from a place of scathing cynicism. You know, for whatever it's worth, I think cynicism is maybe my least favorite quality in people. And that's not to say that I'm innocent of it. It's just too easy to be a cynic. And I think I was very cynical when I was a teenager. And maybe I've mellowed a little. But thank you. I sincerely do try to... It's not that I try to sugarcoat my reviews. Like, you know, I've done several things that I don't think are good comics or have a bad moment. And I try to be honest with that opinion. I just also don't want to be so cynical that it's just a total downer, and it's easy to just shit on something, basically. It's easy to just crap on something. You have to be a little careful with Copics, because it can actually sort of, and it is, sort of picking up a little of the black ink that I've dropped, and it can blend that black ink. So I have to like use a pretty light touch instead of like just going back and forth all over the place. Because these Copics do want to blend colors. That's sort of their thing. I know it probably doesn't show up to like too much color on screen because this is pretty faint, but just get this out of the way and then can move on to some of the more fun, colorful stuff of Deadman. First to do this. Boy, have you guys heard about this new movie, Hereditary? At the beginning of this chat, we were talking a little bit about horror movies, which I like, and I've heard that Hereditary is supposed to be really scary. Kind of hope so. Okay, so Deadman's skin is basically bleach white, essentially, but I don't want to just leave it bleach white, so I'm going to bring out a few shades of light gray. Don't know if I'll go that warm, but just give myself some options here. 0. I'll talk about it in just a sec. Okay, I think that's plenty. So the cool thing is that, like, when you get within a certain color, they're actually, you know, that's a little close, so you probably can't see it, but maybe I can show it up here. No, this isn't nice enough. All right, so in addition to like this being called gray, or specifically warm gray, it then has a number. So this is like W3, and then this is W4. That means it's like a little darker. And then this is W2. I don't know where my warm 1 is, but anyway, I've got 0 here. And you can see, so like, and they do that for like all their colors, so that you can like sort of get a series that's called like, you know, crimson. And then you can sort of go up the number chart, and there's just hundreds and hundreds of these, so that you can really do some dramatic colors. But I'm also looking for a good red for his costume, because he wears a red costume. And you know what? Now that I'm done doing the fine detail, I'm gonna actually back the camera out just a little bit. I'm gonna sneeze, and then I'll read a question. Oh, Randy says, such great work, Chris. I look forward to the next time I can tune in. Randy, thank you for joining me. Folks, Randy has, he makes comics, like, look up Altruist Comics on Facebook, and look up the upcoming anthology comic called IF, which is on Amazon for pre-order these days. I'm pulling out some different reds, and then I'll decide which one I'll use. I want like a really nice, bright one. Something really cool. I'm going to test these out on a scrap piece of paper. Put this up to the side just a little bit. Hey man, your line art is super choice and I appreciate you streaming your work. That said, Deadman's collar and the top of his head create an awkward tangent. You're right. You're right. When you have a line that almost but not quite intersects like this, that's a tangent. And Awesome Shades is correct. I think I'll be able to correct that slightly because this is his skin, which is white, and this will be red, so it won't be as prominent. But he's right. That's actually a pretty basic mistake. I should have definitely made his collar either shorter or bigger so that it didn't have that tangent. He's right. All right, let's see what some of these colors are. All right, that's sort of almost got a maroon quality to it. That one's called light mahogany. This one's called vermilion. That one's too orangey. I'm going to rule that one out right away. This is called light rouge. That's a little pink. Well, I could possibly use that as a highlight, so I'll just set that aside as an option. Lipstick red. Now this is so bright that it'll probably bleed really easily. Some pigments do that more than others. Actually, I really like how that looks, though. That's probably what I'll go with. Salmon red. Salmon red. Oh, yeah, that's too orangey. That's not right for this character. And something called prawn. What's prawn? Again, that's sort of orangey in my opinion. I think that this one in the middle is the winner, and this will be my highlights. And then I'll actually keep the light mahogany for the dark stuff too. So I've sort of got three colors that I can sort of use and blend. And let's see what happens. I mostly color digitally. I do too. But Copic markers are awesome if they were only cheaper. Oh, I know. I didn't buy these. These were all I inherited from my fiance, my girlfriend. She's a professional artist, I would say. She's a painter mostly, but you know, so she buys herself great tools like this all the time. And she gave these to me. These were formerly hers, and she's like, I'm not using these anymore. You can have them. I was like, yeah. I was pretty excited about that. So again, like at the beginning, this may not look like a lot, but hopefully as I drop in a few details, it starts to form a picture of something that looks cool. All right, first I'm dropping in the darkest colors sort of over where I've indicated muscly tissue. I just need to keep the light source in mind. Yeah. I must have sneezed and missed it because All Lucky 7 says Gesundheit. Thanks. Anywhere where it's purely black and I've got like a little highlight, I'll drop in this darkest red. What else? Maybe under here. There. A little here, a little here, a little there, a little here and there. I guess I'm getting punchy as it gets into the evening. I'm being silly. And then, I have to be careful because these want to bleed a little bit, so I have to sort of not quite draw up to the line that I've done, or it'll bleed over the line. You have to sort of do it nearby, see how much it bleeds, and then see if it needs a little more. Okay, people, Copics are awesome but expensive. Karen's back. Welcome. Karen says, "Wow, where can we see her art?" Oh yeah, where would you be able to see my Chrissy's paintings? You know, I don't think she's updated her website a lot because mostly she just, as a painter, sort of does. She gets invited to show her work at galleries. That's actually why we were in Hong Kong back in March. Is Chrissy had a show at a gallery in Hong Kong, and we were actually going to pick up the some of the paintings that had not sold. Um, I think she has a website with some of her older paintings at Chrissy.com, but that's spelled with a Q. Qrissy. I'm pretty sure she has some of her older paintings up there. I think she's really talented, but I'm incredibly biased. Yeah, I think she's a great artist. She inspires me. The room that I'm working in is basically her art room for like when she wants to paint or even make music. She's got a variety of musical instruments in here. Here, I'll see if I can show a little bit of it. It's going to be tricky with this crappy camera, but okay. So up there's a couple easels. This gray thing you probably can't see there, but she's blocked out at painting. And if we rotate the camera around here, you know, like there's just all these sort of like everywhere is just sort of drawers with artistic tools and reference. But like over there, there's like a keyboard here and a violin underneath. She mostly plays violin. Over here are more sort of drawers of art tools and stuff. And then I've got the door closed, but over there, you see that door? That's like a humongous walk-in closet that's just nothing but painting materials, all sorts of art supplies. It's a really cool room to be in, actually. It's really comfortable. And the computer that I live stream off of and like the webcam and stuff, that's really all Chrissy's. She set up a really cool, she built her own computer just to like handle all this stuff. I'm always impressed and in awe with her. Okay, so I think that's, oh no, you know what? Excuse me. Let me drop a little bit more color in on this back of this collar with the darkest red. Then I'm going to do highlights, and then I'll finish up by using the main red for everything. I'm leaving some room for a highlight there. Okay, so now I'm using light rouge. And I'll do a few highlights. I'm really close to being able to wrap this up to a place where I'm pretty happy with it overall. All right, Nuzzoloid's going to bed because it's, time to get ready, not to bed, get ready for work. Stefan JD says, finally catching a live stream of the drawing. Nice. Well, thank you for joining. Chad Frazier joins and says, nice to finally see one of your live streams. Look at all these folks jumping in. I love it. No Hurt Feeling says, do you play any musical instruments? Please say it's the melodica. No, I wish I could. I don't have any real musical aptitude. I can't play any musical instruments, really. I wish I could. Chrissy primarily plays the violin, but she can play, you know, the keyboard. She can play cello or drums. She can play a lot. It's really impressive. We met in D.C. and she was in a band, sort of a goth rock band called American Center, and yeah, I was like, wow, cool. And I'm still like, wow, cool. It's so cool when you're like, when you have a partner who shares an appreciation or respect for something. Like, you know, we do very different kinds of art. I'm into comic books. She's more into surreal painting. But there's still like a deep respect from both of us for the other's work. So we're both types of artists. I think that's fair to say. You know what? Anyway, what else? Chrissy.com redirects to ChrissyDowning.com. She's a surrealist. Neat. She is. I really haven't looked at. I just realized this isn't aimed at me. I haven't looked at her site in a little bit, so I don't know how recent it is. I don't think it's incredibly recent. Like, she's always painting something new. But it still gives you a flavor of what her work is. And she does pretty well for herself. I'm proud of her. Okay. And maybe a little there. Maybe a little there. Maybe a little there. Maybe a little there. I'm just being silly. Alright, now I'm going to work with lipstick red, and the biggest concern I have is that this will want to bleed. Hopefully not. So I'm working with very light brush strokes so that I'm not pushing on the brush much. I don't want to like make all the pigment rush to the brush. Very delicate strokes. The cool thing about Copic markers is when you're talented with them, which I'm kind of a novice, but when you're talented with them, you can blend them really well. I'm looking for the pens. There's even one. It's a really cool brush. I don't think I'll use it, but I want to pull it out and just show you guys. This is just numbered 0, and it's called Colorless Blender. This doesn't have any color in and of itself that you can see, but you can like sort of work it between two different, any two different or more Copic colors, and it'll do an amazing job blending it. I think that's pretty cool. So it isn't painting, but you can sometimes, if you're really talented, get a painterly effect with Copics. It all depends on, you know, how many colors you have, how much time you have to spend on it, and your experience level. But I think that like in person, they look even better than like it does on camera or anything, or like scanned. So this is, you know, actually going to someone. It's not for publication or anything. It's just actually going to someone who might want to hang on to it, might want to, you know, put it on a wall or keep it in a hobby room, something like that, who knows. So that's why I'm using these Copic markers, is because I'm actually physically giving this to somebody at some point. Let's see. Oh, we got a tour. Great. Mark Lawrence is in the chat room. This piece is for Mark Lawrence. Folks, the guy that earned this, that requested this piece, the reason that we're all here right now, the great Mark Lawrence, who also came up with a very interesting topic. It'll take me a little while to get to it, but he earned that, and I'm very excited by both what he asked me to illustrate here tonight and the topic for an episode that will come up in the future. So thank you, Mark. Thank you from me for supporting the channel and watching, and on behalf of everyone here, thank you, because you're the reason this is going on right now, and that we're all talking about comics and things like that. And if anybody else has a question about who Deadman is and his history, now you can just direct that all to Mark. Mark, you're now in charge of answering questions about Deadman since you're here. Karen says, I found her YouTube channel. Yeah, I don't think she's put a lot of content on the YouTube channel, if I remember correctly. But she's been thinking about it, and I'm especially because I have a YouTube channel. I'm like, you know, it's a great way to connect with an audience that has similar interests. And I mean, you know, it's taken me 2 years to get to the point where I have 5,000 subscribers. But I think that a talented artist like Chrissy could probably get that a lot faster with a few videos, because there's a pretty healthy audience I've seen on YouTube for following an artist doing either tutorials or just showing their work. I think that there's a pretty big audience for that, especially compared to comic books. That's just my opinion. But so she's thinking about doing more content for her channel, showing her more modern paintings. I hope she does. But I'm addicted to YouTube. Ah, nice, still streaming, huh? Yeah, until I finish. I wanna finish this piece. I'm happy with how it's coming out for the most part, and I'm pretty close to being able to finish it. So I'm not gonna stop until I'm done on this one. Even though I've got a headache because I really need to eat. It's see, it's 11:30 my time. I have not had dinner yet. I'm probably gonna be up pretty late though, so be it. But I want to finish this. Like, sometimes that's just the way it is, right? When you get started with a project, you just don't want to stop until you finish. It's hard to put something down. I want one of those, but for colored pencils, a burnisher and a colorless blender. Yeah, that would be cool. That would be cool. Is there such a thing, I wonder, to like blend colored pencils? I guess not, because then you'd sort of be transitioning into a type of watercolor. And of course there are sort of watercolor pens and stuff. But yeah, I guess I can't think of a way to blend colored pencils unless you introduced something wet, in which case you're sort of getting away from what pencils do. Seems like she hasn't uploaded anything in a year. Oh wow. But I found a good art live stream that lasts about 2 minutes. It was great. She's also got a huge pencil on that live stream. She does some pretty silly stuff sometimes, yes. I think Chrissy's funny. We have so many different art supplies in our house. I mean, but what's cool is Chrissy's very well organized. Like the quick camera spin around I gave you of the room shows like that there's lots of drawers and stuff. It isn't just like, you know, art supplies piled up in boxes in the middle of a room. It's not like that. She has a lot of materials, but keeps it very well organized. Much more organized than me. I'm trying to like look around for like. So I've sort of taken over the art room lately because of the live streams, and so I've got like just like all these tools all over the place, little off Lego bits, pens over here. This is not well organized. Templates, and then like I've got like sketchbooks and pens here. Those are mine. Art Bristol boards, my tablet. I've been much more disorganized with how I treat the art room. Anyway. Do you think streaming like this has helped your productivity, asks Frankie Will Smile Show. Like keeping you from twittering, etc., keeping you focused. I think it did for me. Yeah, definitely. I love drawing, but if I didn't have if I didn't have the YouTube channel and didn't like sort of do the occasional live streams like this, I would mostly just sort of be sketching and doodling. I wouldn't be producing finished pieces of artwork as often. So yeah, it's definitely helped me draw a little bit more regularly. I feel like I've made some improvements, but I've got a long ways to go to become a better artist, but I do think that I've been drawing a little more regularly, and it's helped me realize some of my weaknesses as well. They've become more obvious because there's an objectivity once you put it on camera and have an audience and stuff. You're like, oh, all right, I see what I'm sort of doing wrong a little bit better. So yeah, it's definitely helped me. You know, and that was because I decided to do the Inktober challenge, where you draw something every single day of October, and then I had such a good experience doing that I wanted to keep doing this. And you know, when it's going well, I do at least one live stream a week. If I'm not doing that, it's just because, you know, real life has gotten in the way and there's just too much work to be done elsewhere. If it was up to me, I'd be live streaming at least once a week, and if I, you know, was a professional YouTuber or something like that, and I'm not even close to being able to do that, but if I was, I'd probably like consider live streaming, you know, like every other day, and, you know, hopefully I'd make some big improvements. I mostly just do this because I love comics and I love to draw. It's not because I think I'm good and I'm teaching folks art lessons here. I don't really have any delusions of that. I'll discuss what I'm trying to go for, and hopefully, you know, that's, you know, interesting or helpful. But I know that I can't quite teach art. And honestly, most of what I'm doing on this channel with the live streams is, this is an illustration. But if you do a comic book, you know, that's panel to panel, and that's a completely different bag of tools. Instead of just drawing one cool drawing, you know, at a time, you have to make sure that they tell a story together, and that really, I think that's a very unique skill that, like, not every comic book artist has. Like, even if you're a great artist, doesn't necessarily mean you're a great storyteller. It means you create cool looking images, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be great at comics. Yeah. Listen to me blather on. I just love comics. That's all that I am. I'm just a guy that loves comics. I like this look for Boston Brand. It's a little bit like Daredevil because it's like an all red suit, but it's the fact that his body is, you know, that of, you know, sort of a ghoul. You know, he's emaciated. He's bleached white because he's dead. You know, there's no life to him. So I don't know a lot about Deadman, but I do like his design. I think that there's definitely something eye-catching about it, especially as we get closer and closer to being done. I think the color adds a lot. Not every comic book character gets a huge benefit from color. You know, they look interesting, but it's not like they get a huge benefit. But I would definitely say that Deadman really becomes complete when he has his color, because you need to contrast that skin, that sort of lifeless skin, with like a colorful costume. It's that contradiction, you know, like to learn that he was a circus performer, but, you know, he's dead now. Like, that's an interesting contradiction to look at. Like, why is this creature that would otherwise sort of look kind of scary, why is he dressed so sort of vividly? And I like that. I'm going to do a couple more highlights, and then I'm going to work on the skin. Oh, cool. Someone called AdPad TV says, hi from New Zealand. That's really exciting. Foof says, Brian Boland did a cover drawing for Animal Man 52 of a lobster holding an eyeball in its pincher, and I love it so much. It's just so ominous and mysterious. Brian Boland, he's an artist I really love. So he'll definitely get an episode of Comic Tropes at some point, and I'll discuss his history and his techniques and what makes him unique and what makes his artwork work. All, of course, in my opinion. It's not like I'm trying to say it definitively, but yeah, I like Brian Boland a lot, man. He's something else. Okay, and now I'm looking at it, and I think that it needs to be blended just a little bit more. So I'm actually going to blend the lipstick red over this maroon, because this is supposed to be sort of dark and shaded. So another cool thing about Copics is you can actually like layer the ink to darken it, which is a pretty nice look. I think that should be darker than light. Yeah. All right, we're getting there. Mark, I hope you're okay with how this is going, because I want you to like it. But I'm fairly happy with how it's coming along, and I'm having a great time talking to everybody. Karen says, I used to participate in the local event of Scott McCloud's 24-hour comic book challenge. Nowadays, they shortened to 4 hours. Yeah, I've done 24-hour comic book day twice. It's quite an experience. It's intense, but boy, you'll be proud of yourself if you do it. Let's see, I've got. I'll use 2 and 3 for like grays, just to give his skin a little bit of depth here and there. Let's see. This is 2, so I'll sort of treat it a little bit like a highlight, but not completely. Yeah, sorry I got quiet. I was just looking at how that looked. Tell you what, I'll zoom back in since I'm sort of doing a little bit of fine detail here. Let's see. Boop, 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 boop. All right. At some point I'll have to get a better camera, I know, and better audio equipment. It's frustrating to want to give you a better experience, and this is the equipment I have, and I don't have the funds to improve it yet. But some point we'll get it looking good. Get a higher resolution camera. Yeah, sort of darken the undersides there. And then I'm going to throw in an even darker gray to really define it. Let's see. Red, black, and white is a cool color combo. Oh, is a cool combination. Yes, I agree. I'm liking that red. Yeah, man. I'm liking it too, Hankification. Looks good so far. Are you keeping the D red? Did I get that wrong, Mark? Is Deadman's D not usually red? I was imagining him to like have an all red costume and then like have exposed feet and hands, just to do it a little differently than other times. If I got it off model, I feel bad. White. Oh, the D is usually white. Geez, I'll be honest. Like, in my head, it was like what I was gonna do. Like, this is what I intended. But I also didn't realize I was getting it off model there. I mean, I went for like an idea that I thought looked kind of cool, yeah. Oh, just realized I missed a spot with his uniform. That sort of makes sense, like that his D would be white because, you know, he's making it stand out as like sort of a circus costume. Maybe I had too much of a Daredevil's costume in my head when I sort of did this. Whoops! I didn't fall. The camera did. Let's see if I can adjust that a little. Problem is that its cord is sort of dragging on it. Sorry, folks. How do you like Boston in the Justice League Dark animated movie? Wasn't expecting that voice. Ah, sorry, Foof. I didn't actually see that. Is it good? Is it worth seeing? Somebody will have to speak up and let us all know. I didn't see the Justice League Dark animated movie. I also briefly considered drawing this as like exposed sort of muscle tissue, like actually, darn it, like drawing the skin and stuff, but it's always shown as like pale bleached white, so I was like, nah, that's a bridge too far to draw it as exposed muscle tissue. I can't go that far off model. In the Bruce Timm shows, it's red. Oh, okay. Huh. I love the face and neck detail. Leave it, Chris. Oh, good. Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I'm pretty happy, honestly, with the face. Like that's probably. But there's some parts of this that, you know, I like at least right now. But we all know that like every artist will only be happy with her most recent piece for so long before we only see the mistakes. That's the life of an artist. I think I might actually need even a darker gray for some of this stuff at the very bottom here. Yeah. So that's where the lighting should be darkest. Man, like, the idea of this guy running around with bare feet to me seems freaky. I don't know. I feel like that's not something you see with superheroes. But I feel like this is a character that could easily do that. It's like, why not? He's dead. Like, he could do whatever he wants. Let's see. I missed some stuff. Neil Adams' version is white. I'm not fussed after seeing how well it turned out. Fair enough. Neil Adams is sort of the definitive version, but you know, see, if Bruce Timm did it this way, I feel a little less guilty. Maybe I've actually seen that version and just wasn't even thinking about it, you know? Could have been subconsciously influenced. I do like Bruce Timm's work. Yeah, get that a little darker here and there. What else is in the chat? KD Alpha says, "Oh wow, I just entered, and oh my God, isn't that amazing?" Oh, you're kind. Kind of like Phantom of the Opera. Yeah, definitely. Chris, have you heard of the comic Alters? That's from No Hurt Feeling. I don't think so. That doesn't ring a bell. Alters. Is it good? I don't think I've heard of that one. Okay, now I'm going to use. You know what? I'm going to use a paler red than I've used. Yeah, for his sort of alive version up here. What's Alters about? Because I don't think I've heard of it. Tell me a little bit about it, though. They can't catch you if you're dead. Deadman, presumably. Yeah, no one's going to catch Deadman ever. So, Mark, since you're in the room and you requested Deadman, do you have a favorite iteration of his stories? Would it be the Neil Adams comics, or another version? Like, I don't know. I'm not super familiar with him myself. I was saying this earlier in the chat before you joined. I know what he looks like, you know, and I've seen him in a couple things, but more as guest appearances. I don't think I've ever really sat down and read Deadman comics before. So since you're here, like, what's your favorite version of Deadman, so that you know, so that we can understand where you're coming from with this request. Let me see here. All right, I need to pull out one more color because I feel like his sort of alive version is just a little too pale, even though I sort of envisioned him sort of in the spotlight and pale. I think he needs to be darkened up a little bit. Let's see, there, centered. You know what? I'm going to have to flip this so that I do it the best I can. I put him in like a really harsh lighting here so that even though this is supposedly his alive acrobatic circus guy version, that he still sort of looked dead, like with these harsh shadows. Like he sort of looks a little skeletal in them almost. That was my goal. Yeah, I think that's a little better. Who's the other guy there? Live Boy? Yeah, that's it, Frankie Smile Show. Mark says that his favorite version of Deadman is Neil Adams. Favorite story is where Batman and him team up for the first time, and he possesses Bruce Wayne and records his story for him to play back. I haven't read that yet, but I'll look it up. That sounds cool. I'm going to zoom back out so that everybody can see the piece. Just give me 2 seconds here. All right. So, yeah, there. So, the only piece of Bristol I had was like a really long one that I'm going to cut to a normal size before I mail it out to Mark. And by the way, Mark, if you could shoot me your mailing address wherever you want me to send this. I'll get this in the mail ASAP. But yeah, so my idea is sort of this was him in life, but this is him now. He's Deadman. And I guess I should give it a little signature, right? Make it all official. CP 18. All right. What's your opinion on the current trend of making superhero costumes more like armor and super detailed? I do think that some artists go over the top with it a little bit. I think it looks great in live action. I do. I think that like the Marvel costumes, like what they do for Captain America and Ant-Man, things like that, I think they look pretty cool. I don't think it's completely necessary in a comic book. And I'm someone that loves, some detail. Like I like somebody like, a Brian Hitch or something. But I don't think you need to show all the seams on a costume, at least not consistently all the time. I think I just think it's unnecessary, and I think it probably makes a lot more work for the artist. I think it's easy enough to buy into the idea of, hey, this is a superhero in a skin-tight type of uniform. I don't think we need to see the zippers and seams and things like that, all those extra sort of lines. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it looks bad necessarily, but I don't think it's necessary. Foof says, his voice acting, I'm just discovering, is from Brooklyn, New York. Maybe Brooklyn. Oh, okay. And it makes sense since it's Boston, but the Boston accent is so huge. I love it. Bada bing, bada boom. I'm walking here. Well, his name is Boston Brand, but is Boston Brand from... I don't know where he's from, whether he's from New York or if he's actually from Boston, Massachusetts, like me, or what. Mark says that like his favorite story is what he thinks is the first time Batman and Deadman meet. Do you think Deadman would be a poor choice for a Hostess Fruit Pie comic short? Nope. I think it would be a great choice, and I think he should actually possess the Hostess Fruit Pie itself. He should literally possess the fruit pie, the criminal eats it, and then Deadman explodes out of him. And it turns out that inside that super criminal, it's now just all fruit pie filling. So just extra fruit pies for everybody. That's the fruit pie story I envisioned for him. All right. Hey, thank you, everyone in the chat room or anyone that stopped by the chat room. Thank you to anyone watching this when it's archived. There's Deadman, and I had fun doing this. I had a lot of fun doing this. I had a lot of fun talking to all of you. Yeah, it's you know what? I'm going to add one more detail that I just can't stop. Where did I put the W2? That's the one I'm looking for. I'm looking for W2. I can't find it. I want to add. Is this it? There it is. I want to add one last line. This is so dumb. But if I didn't do it, it would bother me. Okay, I know that was stupid, but to me, it mattered. I'm going to take off, folks. It's way past time for me to have some food. No signature. No, I did sign it, Foof. I did. This down here is CP. Those are my initials. Sign it CP and marked it 18. So I did sign it. That's how I send my work, just CP. All right, I had a great time talking to you. Take care, everybody. Go to sleep if it's late, and if it's first thing in the morning, wake up and have a cup of coffee. And I will see you soon, I hope. All right, take care. Bye.